Static. All she could hear was static. Although the radio blared another simple-minded pop song. The sounds were clashing with some commercial from Channel 87, and the constant bump in the road and the jostle of collectibles scattered across the back seats. She couldn't hear a thing. She was too trapped in her mind. So trapped she almost forgot where she was. Trees of oranges and yellows phased into the road seemingly ongoing, constantly the same, like a loop. A cruel joke never to get to that final destination. But it wasn't. Through the clearing, a small gas station appeared. As she approached it, she turned curiously, unable to tell if it was abandoned or in simply completely dismal condition. It was caked over the gashed concrete. The roof was in shambles and dirt-stained glass dismembered, scattered across the ground, and the air was encased with a musty smell like an old basement wafting from inside the store. Silky threads of cobwebs laced on everything, from the doorknob to the sign, even covering the rest to gas pumps. But she turned into the small gas station. The radio was now flashing to uncontrollable static as she slowed to a stop, her car leaning over the faintly painted lines, clasping her hands on her head. Cold breeze drifting through the cracked window, the sky fading into shades of crimson and gold, the sun creeping into the shadows of the sky. Her palms grew wet from the tears that grazed her cheeks, her face turning a soft pink. With one subdued hand, she reached for a vial, the liquid sloshed around in her hand, glistening in temptation before tossing it down. Her tears abruptly stopped when she heard the slam of car door and the pounding of feet on a pavement, the signature stench of drowned and drenched cologne wafted into her nose, stinging it intensely. Her eyes narrowed as she ascended from the car, the wind whistling in her ears, and the cool night illuminating her pale skin. The air is crisp and silent, and he gave a slight cough, clearing his throat. "Hello, Natalia," he said, breaking the silence. She looked at him up and down. His posture was crooked and his movements were limp. His hair draped down over his forehead, seeming to shine a burnt sienna shade, wrapping it all up with a deep frown tearing through his face, and rings like Saturn under his eyes. "Hi," she grumbled through clenched teeth, her eyes seeming to pierce into him. "Come on now," he began to say smoothly as he lulled his head back. "If we want to find her, we're going to have to work together." "I'd rather work with anyone than you," Natalia replied coldly, rolling her eyes, glancing up to see his dark eyebrows furrow, lips clenched together, opening his mouth to remark, only to close it and reconsider, to be the quote, better person. He took a deep breath. "We both want her back. So you and I are going to have to work together one last time, whether we like it or not." She gave another slight grumble as she plopped back into her car. "Well, get in." Meticulously, he sat in the passenger seat, carefully brushing off crumbs and sliding junk to somewhat comfortably sit in the car. They were back on the road, the radio once again blaring random songs to fill the absent void. The reluctant passenger warily glancing around the vehicle. He could obviously smell the intoxicating fumes from the vial. The whole car lingered of the smell like he lingered of drenched cologne. Natalia looked at the road, her nimble hands wavering on the steering wheel. "So, what will you do if you find her?" Chad glanced up at Natalia. Once we find her, I'll hug her and I'll tell her how I'll never leave her again. Custody? Oh. Well, I guess we're going back to court then, because I am never trusting you with anything again. That's funny how you seem to care now, Natalia replied sharply. And what if you never find her? Said as she glanced up at him. His face was stern, carefully studying each object in the car like it was some scavenger hunt, and he was some Sherlock Holmes or something. Each object was meticulously placed with one flawed point to unravel the whole mystery. Looking at him, she noticed how ragged his hair was, and in the light of the car she saw the depth of the rings under his eyes from the countless nights without sleep. I'll never stop looking for my daughter, he answered back coldly, his voice rasped and dry. Grin escaped onto Natalia's face from the sheer lies that came out of his mouth, the stern tone of his voice, and as he said how he will find her. She laughs a bit, quietly, unheard by the loud radio, as he narrows his eyes, grinding his teeth at her. A warm breath left her mouth, tickling her nose. I didn't, she muttered under her breath, like she could read his thoughts, like she was convincing herself. The car slowed to a stop. The only sound to be heard was the car engine roaring to a stop, and the rustling of trees in the wind. Dew poured into the car as Natalia swung her door open, keys jangling in her hand as she sauntered over to the other side of the car, swinging the passenger door open. Chad got out in a lackadaisical manner. His eyes were droopy, consciousness fading from his eyes. He blindly followed her into the depths of the forest. Trees loomed over the lone car. The sun slowly began to rise once again. The world was once again awake, and the birds had begun to sing, the animals scurrying about. Like the night was nothing but a dream. As Natalia appeared through the shadows of the forest, staggering, she made her way back to the car, keys jangling as she unlocked it. Hunching back down into the car, she took a swig from the vial, her hands fluctuating back to the steering wheel. Continued back on the road, the car once again roaring back to life, and she once again alone. With one hand, she turned the radio back to life, unable to cope with the sounds of her thoughts. Mommy, Mama, where are we going? Echoed through the car. Natalia quickly shut off the radio, snapping her head back to see her little girl sitting there. Just a bit further, she said, the vision feeling hazy, and her mind was sloshing into reality until she couldn't tell what's real and not. She had the desire to take another swig from the vial. Natalia watched her child suffocate. Banging and pounding and thrashing clutter flew around the car. Natalia caressed her temples until the images died down, a single hand on the wheel. She glanced back at the passenger seat to see Chad, a sneer on his dark and blurry face. I'll never stop looking for my daughter, Natalia, bounced in her mind. Static. Then there was static.
Cause I want you bad. Yeah, I want you, baby. Slow, slow hands, like sweat dripping down that dirty lawn.
And the man on the jukebox, and then we start to dance, and I'm singing like